And welcome to another edition of the Batchelor News Radio Show. Um, this is our podcast. We appreciate you joining us as always. You could be doing anything else, and you decided to make us a part of your day. I want to bring in my first guest. He is the head football coach at Morgan State. Bears coming off a tough loss, but this man will always bounce back and always turn it around. He is Damon Wilson. Coach, always a pleasure to have you on, sir.
Yes, it's good to be on. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Good to finally connect, too. um,
Without a doubt.
let's talk about this Ohio game. You go to Athens, and despite the effort you guys put up, and, when you started the game, things were really kind of going your way early. But nevertheless, you're down 14-6. Before I kind of get into some of the numbers, what did you say to your team down 8 in a hostile environment against a very good football team to go into the second half?
The message was just continue to compete, just continue to fight. Our whole deal was try to, be in the ball game into the fourth quarter and let the chips fall where they may. No self-inflicted penalties or self-inflicted wounds, if you will, and just give us a chance to win in the fourth quarter. And I think all in all, we did that. It hurt when we came back out the half, and we did not stop them on that first drive. But then when we marched down the field offensively, we didn't punch the ball in. That was really important to have a chance to win the ball game in the fourth quarter.
Did they do anything defensively that maybe you didn't plan for? Whatever film that you've seen, it seems as though you had some drives, but you were unable to generate and even finish those drives.
No, I think they were exactly where we thought they would be. The difference in the ball game was our red zone offense. We had three 10-play drives that marched down the field and didn't get any points from those drives. Then we were +3 in the turnover margin, and we didn't get but 3 points off of one of the turnovers. So when you're in that situation and you +3 turnover margin and you don't score in the red zone, that's not a recipe for success. And time of possession, we won that battle. Penalties, we had fewer penalties, but we did not execute well on third down and or in the red zone offensively.
Yeah, it had to be a little frustrating to get the turnovers. They benched the quarterback. The other kid comes in, 9-play, 74-yard drive. I think you're talking about that. And then, it leads to that 13-yard touchdown. They extend the lead 21-6.
Definitely frustrating. We have to take advantage of those turnovers. I mean, in order to win football games against good opponents, and you turn the ball over and you don't produce points, that's not good. That's something that we talked about, at the beginning of the season, and we talked about this week after reviewing the film. And we had opportunities in the red zone. I mean, it wasn't a situation where, they were dominating us in the red zone, anything like that. We may not have made the right step, hit the right receiver, all that sort of deal. But we had guys open. We had plays to be made. We just didn't make the plays.
Talking with Damon Wilson, of course, head football coach at Morgan State. Bears getting ready for another game. We'll talk about that in just a bit on the Batchelor News Show. Coach, talk about some of your players on offense. When you look at what Andre Crawley did, J.J. Davis, talk about some of the some of the positives that came out of the loss.
Well, one thing that stood out to me is we had 4 sophomores and 1 freshman offensive lineman start. So out of those 5 guys that started up front, I think they held their own for the most part for being young guys. As you mentioned, is Leatherberry and JJ and Miles Myree. And we were short KJ, our starting running back, that had started the first 2 games for us. But then we got Jason Collins, who comes in and adds some depth at that position as well. So, we want to just make sure we get the ball in our playmakers' hands and give those guys an opportunity to make plays.
Talk about your quarterback with 15 completions. He He threw for 136. Pretty solid in the play in terms of not making a lot of mistakes. Talk about that, and then flip over to the defensive side, because with the winning the turnover battle, not scoring in the red zone, and you only give up 21 points.
Yeah, Taj is doing a much better job getting the ball out of his hands. I think this is his sixth or seventh college football game that he's played in, and he's continued to get better, and he's getting a better grasp of the offense. I love to continue to watch him grow and develop with regards to, as you mentioned, the guys play pretty much lights out football outside of two big plays that we gave up during the course of the game, in that big drive right after half. But we played well enough to win defensively. I think our defense was on the field for maybe 50 plays or so. So we kept the ball out of their hands. And like I said, we just did not execute well enough offensively. We even gave up a extra possession on the kick return. They had a surprise onside that they ended up recovering. And then the next play, the defense got an interception. So we were able to overcome some of the challenges, but we did not, like I say, produce points in the red zone.
How do you keep the defense motivated when they're doing their job really, and it's a team effort, and certainly you want to promote that, but human nature kicks in. Maybe they're not saying anything, but you can feel some frustration because they are trying to compete and give the offense the best chance in the best part of the field to try to make a play. How do you keep them motivated and keep the team together like that?
If I have to keep a player be motivated to play football, then I got the wrong guy. No matter the situation. At the end of the day, what I tell our guys is, if you don't let them score at all, it's 0-0 if offense doesn't score. So we allow those guys to score 21 points. In the first game of the season, Hampton scored 28 points and our offense scored 30 points. So at the end of the day, we need each other to be successful in all three phases. But I think our coaching staff does a great job. Coach Sewell and the staff defensively do a great job keeping those guys grounded, keeping them focused on the task at hand. But the bottom line, keep out the end zone is 0-0 ball game if we don't have any production offensively or special team.
Your pedigree, your championship pedigree speaks for itself. Your resume speaks for itself. What did you bring from Bowie to Morgan State to kind of bring that certain element that some of the players, especially your new recruits and guys that didn't play for you before, understand where you're coming from? In other words, was it something that you had to say, a philosophy you had to get across to them to get them to understand, I'm Damon Wilson, and I'm a champion. You want to get on board, you do it the way I want it.
No, it's never about me. It's about us, and that's something that once again we talk about. It's something that one of my experiences at Bowie State has prepared me for the opportunity, and we're able to talk about different reference points, things that I may have encountered at Bowie and or have encountered at Morgan. But the biggest thing is just we're a family, and we're going to fight together on and off the field. We're there as a coaching staff as a support system for you. However, it's your responsibility and your obligation to do what you need to do as a student athlete and perform in the classroom as well as on the football field. And that's one of the biggest things is just that family atmosphere, that family feeling, that accountability, the belief in one another, being selfless, giving effort, walking around and doing things respectfully and giving respect to others. Those are things that we talk about. Those are things that we live by as a program. And that's what's ultimately going to drive us, of course, to win the ball games and ultimately championships.
Before I get to the season and talk about some of your toughness that you have, when you look at the stats, obviously, again, stats to me are overrated. They have 335 total yards, but that doesn't say what you did in the red zone and, stopping them and getting turnovers. It just looks at, 20-20, really, I always say. And I think that's misleading. But one stat that caught me I want you to kind of talk about was on third down. Um, they were 5-9, and they had 22 first downs. So does that tell you that they got, when they were on third down, it was always sort of third and short instead of third and long? In other words, they got most of the yards on first and second down, which made their conversion rate better on third down.
Definitely. I mean, we want to be third and manageable, and I think they did a good job being third and manageable, and where we didn't do a good job being third and manageable offensively, and it also tells us that we have to improve on our third down defense and our third down efficiency offensively. So definitely, those numbers are what allows you to stay on the field and or get off the field. We had more plays than those guys. I think we ran 61 plays, if I'm not mistaken, where they were somewhere in the 50s. So we ran more and we had more opportunities, but they took advantage of theirs and we didn't take advantage of ours.
Yeah,
And that's where
time.
the plus three turnovers come from.
Yeah, time of possession was about even.
Okay.
So again, that tells you you guys were there and didn't finish. But speaking of which, I mean, Coach, I've said this to you all the time when you come on the show. What makes you so different? You go to Hampton, right? And they have high hopes this year. Hostile environment, and you get it done. You barely lose to Townsend State again on the road. And then again, the game we just talked about with Ohio. Why is it? How do you keep the guys in it? How do you stay in the physicality? One of the things your signature is ground and pound and be able to ground the ball and play good defense. Is that the formula for the success that you've had?
I think defense wins championships. So having the opportunity to play solid defense and play some special teams and be sound offensively, that's the recipe for success. So yes, we're going to be physical. Yes, we're going to get off the bus or off the plane ready to play. We're going to fight for full quarters. We're not going to make excuses, and we're going to give our entire effort to be successful as a football program, no matter who we play and where we play. And that's something that's instilled in these guys. Our locker room, our veteran leadership is definitely takes over at times when we're faced with adversity. They understand that what the challenge is. They understand what it's all about to be at Morgan State and playing Morgan State football. So yes, these guys get it. They understand it, and ultimately they're the ones on the field that's giving us an opportunity to be successful.
One of the things about your schedule this year, we're talking with David Wilson here, head football coach at Morgan State, um, is that you have all your out of conference games for the most part, with the exception of one um, at the beginning, and then on the backside is all MEAC games. It was that by design, or was it because of the structure of the conference now? So you're going to be playing less in the conference and playing more out of conference, and why all so many in the beginning and so many, as I just mentioned, your first three on the road.
Well, the conference schedule is yes by design with regards to conference scheduling, and I actually like the setup because it gives you an opportunity to try to get on all cylinders before you play any conference opponent. With regards to the home and away schedule, we were able to have 12 games this year. We have 6 on the road, and we have 6 at home. And fortunately enough for us, some of those conference games on the back end are at home. I think we have the last, I want to say 6 out of the last 9 or so are at home, which is great because when you're talking about having an opportunity to be successful and win championships or be in that championship conversation, of course you would like to do it in your own backyard. And I think we have an opportunity to do those things.
Do you get some of the your players that know your reputation, that you feel, certainly if you see it in practice, that they know your pedigree? And I know it's not about you, it's about the team, but you are the coach, you are the successful coach. Say what you want, you are, right? So do you feel them getting a little complacent because of who you are and where you come from? And have you had a chance to catch any of Bowie's games, or kept up with him at all?
No, I think just the opposite with regards to the guy's mindset. Because one thing I talked about coming into camp, I had guys stand if they won one championship, and quite a few guys stood up. Hey, because remain standing if you won two championships. Maybe more than half of those guys sat down. Hey, stand up if you continue to stand if you won three championships, and
Mm,
everyone pretty much. A lot of people haven't accomplished that, and let alone gone to championships. I have two Super Bowl winning coaches on my staff, so they've won at the highest level, and
right.
I think they understand that we know what it takes to be successful as a staff. I think the staff has done a good job recruiting champions. Because one thing about a champion, you don't have to teach that guy how to win and the things that is necessary to do to be successful. So that's been a blessing for us. But we're not at that point yet. We just continue to talk about getting better each day and winning the day. And in reference to Bowie, yes, I talk to Coach Jackson at least once a week. He's a guy that I coached in college. He's a guy that I'm just super duper proud of in what he's doing with our alma mater and getting the guys prepared to play. They started off a little slow this season thus far with two tough non-conference opponents, but I expect those guys to pick it up and be ready to rock and roll. So yes, that's a spot that's really near and dear to me, and that staff is near and dear to me as I coach several of the guys on that staff.
On a side note on that, we all have to make the decisions for our families and our future. So certainly, I understand that. But was it tough leaving? I mean, here, this is your alma mater. You was an all CIAA tight end. I mean, all of that, all the bells and whistles there. Was it tough? Kind of making that final decision and saying, this is like really emotional for you.
One of the toughest professional decisions I ever had to make. You got to look at the people that's on that campus and the people that molded me as a student, and then it gave me an opportunity to be a college head football coach. I was there 13 years, was able to help the university win its first championship, and then win them back to back, which is something that hadn't been done before. So definitely very tough decision. Decision that I relied heavily on. Speaking to my family, as you mentioned, I actually talked to the players at Bowie as well before I made a decision. And they are the ones that allowed me to make the decision in a good head place. When I asked those guys, some of the leaders, guys, hey, this is an opportunity that's been presented to me. What do you think? And I've had to a man, they say, Coach, you've done all you can go do here. Go turn that program around. And
Mm.
that is really what made me drop my guards and call the administration back at Morgan and tell them, let's move forward because I know we had done our job at Bowie. Because anytime you get a 18 or 22-year-old to make to tell me or tell a grown up, hey, you've done your work here, we got it. You go ahead and take on the challenge there. It was really relieving for me because those guys, we put a lot of time in developing that program, and like I said, it's always will have a special place for me.
Well, Fayetteville State winning. uh, Hey, they saw you leave. It's like, woo, good riddance. Oh my God! Now maybe we could. I mean, come on, the Northern Division. Come on, Northern Division. It say see Bowie State when you look at the Northern Division. I mean, with respect to the Virginia teams, well, I mean, really, that's that thing, and your unique position where coaching in the SWAC and all these teams there. Talk about this MEAC season and these teams. Obviously, Central, a lot of people are picking. Howard has a very good squad. Talk about this conference and who you expect to be the toughest that's gonna kind of get in your way to win a conference championship.
I tell you what, I wish I could tell you something different, but we have 5 conference games and 6 conference schools. There is no easy week in the MEAC, and I wish I could tell you something different, but it's not. And that's something every coach in the conference has won at least one championship.
Yeah,
So you're talking about championship pedigree across the conference. I'm not sure how many conferences can say that.
right.
So we all know what it takes to be successful and win championships. So now it's about the right guys being on the field at the right time towards the end of the season, and who's hitting on all the cylinders. That's really what it boils down to. Everyone has a pretty tough non-conference schedule whether it's playing other FCS schools, FBS schools, or even a Division II school. It's going to be tough, but we must be hitting on all cylinders towards the end of October to give ourselves a chance to be in that mix in late November.
Yeah, well, when all my colleagues that cover not just the MEAC, but the HBCU football, when you came in, you're right. I mean, it's loaded with great coaches, and probably the best in all of HBCUs, I would say, in terms of the championship pedigree. All right, Coach, let's look at your next game, and it again, what do we know about Virginia University of Lynchburg? Of course, it's Bear Family Day. You'll be at home, but what do we know about them? What do they like to do offensively and defensively that can give you some issues?
Well, they're a feisty team. They're looking to get their first win of the year. They've played a few FCS programs, and they haven't had a lot of success thus far. They have some guys on their team that will cause problems defensively. They have a linebacker, number 20, that really gets after it in the run game as well as pass game. Offensively, they got a running back, man. They have a lot of transfers on their team. I think they're just working on gelling together and that sort of thing. But their running back is a good college football player. I think we have some advantages in certain situations, but it's not a program that we cannot be hitting on all cylinders and think we're going to be successful.
It's speaking of that in terms of some of the players they may have, Coach. With has the portal helped or hurt you in or college football from this level, especially because now you see the Ohio's Central almost beat North Carolina last weekend. They were toe to toe into halftime and things, and second half they got away from them a little bit. But has the portal helped or hurt, you think, you as a coach and as a sport?
I think it has its place. I'm not a big transfer portal guy with regards to recruiting. I love to develop the high school guy. However, I understand the importance of bringing some older guys in your program. I think from a administrative standpoint, transfer portal possibly hurt schools because now that young man or that student athlete is not on your campus for 4 to 5 years. That student may be on there for a semester, may be on there for a year. So when you're talking about annual giving and that sort of thing may change or may impact that in that arena. But from a football or athletic standpoint, it allows you to kind of get older fast. It allows you to get some good quality football players in your program that you may not have had a chance to get to out of high school. So it definitely has its benefits, but I also see the cons as well from an administrative standpoint.
Yeah, you get mixed reviews. We've talked off air about Nick Saban and some of these other coaches that have stepped out like they don't want any part of it. And you got the old school thought, and you got the new school thought. I guess it's the way you can call it. But I digress. So, give us the keys to winning against Virginia University of Lynchburg and getting that second dub this year.
Focusing on us, focusing on Morgan State, making sure third down efficiency and third down defense is not a problem this week. Making sure anytime we're in the red zone, we're coming out with some points. Making sure just because a team gets in the red zone, we do not allow them to score the ball. Those are the things that we've been talking about all week. Continue to turn the ball over defensively, continue to protect the ball offensively. If we do those things, I think we'll be in great shape to win the ball game.
Coach, it's always a pleasure. I mean, if I sat here and went down the list of all your accomplishments, that'd be another half hour of the show. But we know all the National Coach of the Year, the championships, the Northern, the Eastern, and the Coach of the Year, and I mean everything. Box of the Row, you're the Black College national champion. The list goes on and on and on and on. But thank you so very much. Best of luck this weekend. I probably will be there. And just go do what you do, and we'll talk with you very soon, sir.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you for having me as usual, and please continue to cover our football. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Coach.
All righty.
All right. Damon Wilson is the head football coach at Morgan State, and you got to kind of catch yourself and remember, and that in the MEAC they have quite a few championship coaches. Like he says, should be interesting. Hopefully they don't have a hiccup in this week. Of course, is a game they should win, and we will keep you up to date on that. Take a break, come back, talk to Carl Luke Williams on the Batchelor News Show.
HBCU Pro Sports Media Association, providing accurate and comprehensive coverage of historically black colleges and university sports, news, features, commentary, analysis, and multimedia content from the leading voices in black media. We are committed to telling the stories of HBCU athletes and programs. Visit us at hbcuprosportsmedia.com.
Hey, this is Craig Batchelor Jr.
And this is Kevin Batchelor. And this is Smooth Tay. And you're listening to
the Batchelor News Radio Show
on the Batchelor News Radio Network.
Times have changed. Times have changed. The power to create your own influence through your own network is now in your own hands. As a creative, marketing is essential, and you're limited to the number of marketing vehicles you have access to by the amount of money you have in your budget. We can help get you exposure all over the US, Africa, UK, for as little as $35 a month on our Roku and Amazon Fire Stick network. Big Mind Entertainment, we're the vehicle for creators of today and tomorrow.
Voters 50 and over have the power to decide elections. They vote in big numbers, and they want candidates who will fight for their families and their financial security. They told AARP that protecting Social Security and supporting family caregivers are among their top priorities. So candidates who want to win need to start talking about the issues they care about. Learn more from our latest polling in Montana at aarp.org/mtpolling. That's aarp.org/mtpolling. Paid for by AARP.
Hope for the Warriors is dedicated to supporting the military and their families. In 2023 alone, over 29,000 post-9/11 veterans, service members, military spouses, caregivers, and their families were impacted by the incredible work of Hope for the Warriors. Hope for the Warriors provides successful programs in all aspects of well-being. Join this life-changing mission. Support Home for the Warriors today by donating and help make a difference in the lives of those who have served our country with bravery and honor.
Welcome back to the show. As promised, I want to bring in my good friend and colleague. Of course, he is the CEO, publisher, and writer for the Black College Sports page. He is Carl Luke Williams. And Carl, looking good, my friend. Good to see you.
Feeling good, man. Coming up on a birthday this weekend on Sunday. I'm turning the big 70. I know I don't look it.
No, you don't. You don't. You really don't. And yeah. I seen you recently. You really don't.
Well, thank you, man. I thank you. But I got my folks coming in, family coming in, my 4 sons, my 17 grandchildren. I think my great-granddaughter who lives in Africa won't be able to make it. She's with my granddaughter and her husband over in Africa. But looking forward to a very exciting weekend. 70, nothing but a number. But God willing, and thank God that I plan to, God willing, to celebrate this weekend.
Oh, absolutely. You deserve it. And it's amazing. You're blessed to, I'm assuming you're saying your parents are still living and
my parents have been gone quite a while. Obviously when I'm 70, my mother had me when she was 44 years old.
Okay.
I'm the baby, the youngest of 4 in my family. So, no, my mother and father have passed on, thank God, and I thank them every day for having bringing me up and the wonderful parents that they were. But thankfully and gracefully and gratefully, I've reached this number. So I'm very thankful for that.
Absolutely. And happy early birthday to you, and many, many, many
Appreciate
more to come.
Appreciate
Take care of yourself. So I'm sure there's many, many, many more to come. I'm sure you heard Damon Wilson before you came on.
Yes, I did.
What about Morgan State? You talked about this team. You talked about Howard. Obviously, Central, they went toe-to-toe with Carolina last week until, the second half or so. Talk about Morgan State and talk about this MEAC conference.
Man, let me tell you, and we talked about this on our preseason show when you had me on before, and I was talking about how Morgan State is an up and coming team. But when you think about the MEAC is full of great coaches, man, across the board. When you talk about Chinnis Berry coming to South Carolina State, when you got Coach Scott up at Howard coming off of winning the championship last year, you got Trey Oliver, who's proven himself over these past few years at Central, and Lee Hall up at Delaware State. I just got a call before I got on with you asking for kind of a scouting report. They're playing at Richmond this week. In fact, Richmond may be going there. I'm not sure. I think it might be in Dover. But Lee Hall is a guy that came into the MEAC, won a championship at Morgan State, and went to the NFL. And when the MEAC show, coaches show was on this past Monday, or a couple of Mondays ago, I asked him about that. And he said he went to the NFL because the opportunity was there, but he found out that he's really a college coach, almost like what Deion says. He doesn't want to deal with the high-priced NFL athletes. Lee Hall is a great coach, and I would not be surprised to see Delaware State, who has been down for several years, or would not be surprised to see them back in the upper echelon of the 16 MEAC. So Dawson Odoms down at that Norfolk State is a great coach, proved himself down at the SWAC at Southern, kept Southern in the mix every year. I thought Norfolk State was on the rise. They took a big loss to Hampton this past week, and actually had some rumors. People call me asking me, had Norfolk State let him go? I haven't seen any evidence of that. No. And I hope they don't, because I think that you give him time, he will also have that Norfolk State team. So the bottom line is the MEAC, top to bottom, has great coaches, coaches with great staffs, and I think it's going to be a very intense 16 race if you give these guys a chance to get their feet under them at these various institutions.
How big of a win, though, was that for Coach Wilson on the road, hostile environment, Hampton's first game? I mean, that had to be a big win for them.
Oh, absolutely. And, Hampton has a new coach. He's really only an interim coach, Trent Boykin. They moved away from their previous coach and brought him in this year, kind of like in a trial basis. And they had a good win this past week over Norfolk State, as I said. But that for them to go down there, for Morgan State to go down to Hampton and win that opening game, it showed you what we talked about in the preseason. And you talked about it with Damon Wilson. He's his accolades and his accomplishments are well known. He dominated the CIAA. I thought it was a great move when he left Bowie State after 3 straight championships, 3 straight appearances, even a little deep run into the playoffs. To move over to Morgan State was perfect because he's so familiar with that Baltimore area. And look, Bowie State hadn't been the same since he left. Let's be clear. Right. They're not the beast of the North as they were when he was there. And the coach that coached under him, who's now running the program, has had trouble trying to attract the same kind of players that Coach Wilson had when he was at Bowie State. And the problem may be that those guys he's attracting to Morgan State now and getting Morgan State in the mix in the MEAC. So, no, big win to open the season down in Hampton on the road.
I was going to say that I would think because of Coach Wilson, some of that recruit stuff will shift to Morgan State. The DMV is wide open with all these talented schools. Right. Let me ask you the question I asked him about the transfer portal. Do you think it's helped or hurt the game, in particular HBCU sports, football, basketball, if you will,
Well,
Or is it something that, it's just really more player driven? Because now you see these Toledos and Ohio's and all these other schools going into these environments, and if not winning, coming close to win, because they sprinkling these talent guys who were the third defensive lineman at Oklahoma go to a smaller institution. So what say you about that?
Well, I think Coach Wilson gave you a great answer, pros and cons. He talked about what his preference is, that he prefers to develop high school kids. The problem is that as soon as the big schools find out you have a talent, they're going to come looking for them. That's the nature of the beast as it is now. And with NIL and money being a part of the equation now, it's not just the opportunity to play up or to play at a higher level, but there's also an opportunity to put some money in your pocket.
Right.
So I think he gave a great answer, that there are pros and cons. He said one thing, he said you can get older quicker, because it's nothing like when you're trying to rebuild and you have to pretty much start over. You have a big graduating class and you're relying upon freshmen or sophomores with little experience. And the whole thing that he said, you get older quicker, you get more experience, people who've already played. So, I mean, it happens both ways. There are people leaving the FBS to come down to the FCS level or come down to the Division II level. And there are people like, right here in Greensboro where I am, Batchelor was a running back at North Carolina A&T. He tore up the conference that he was in at the time, 1 year in the MEAC and 1 year in the CAA. And he was off to Virginia Tech, and he's doing very, very well at Virginia Tech. And nobody can blame him. He was barely recruited out of high school. He talked about that while he was at A&T. He didn't really have any offers. A&T opened the door for him. He performed well at A&T, and he moved up. So I think that it's a mixed bag, and I think it's going to be that way for a while. People like Deion Sanders could take advantage of that and get guys to come and play for him that had played at big schools, like James Houston, who left the University of Florida to come to Jackson State. So I think it's, I think what Coach Wilson said is how they're going to take it. You'll take the ones that you can get, and the ones that you lose. And, it's probably even more painful in basketball, because I know Lavelle Moten, for example, down at Central just hates this environment. It's like he says no loyalty, but the loyalty pretty much to these guys is about their futures, what is going to be the best for their futures. And if it is best for them, no matter how well they played at Central, to go somewhere else. And look, in the league, for example, in the NFL right now, we have a couple of guys. Brian Cook for the Kansas City Chiefs, the starting center, started at Howard, went to Cincinnati, ends up being a second-round pick. Nick Leverett went to North Carolina Central for 3 years. He transferred to Rice. He's now in the league for his fifth year in the league. So people who are what the biggest thing is that it gives these athletes an opportunity to market themselves, get the greatest bang for their buck. And who can blame them for that, especially if you're trying to move on to play at the next level. So, again, I think that the way he answered is perfect. It has its pros and it certainly has its cons as well.
Just to stay with that, I think one comment, there's still, I know Coach said, there's no loyalty, but there's still an element of players that are doing this because A, they might be the first one to graduate from college. B, they may be seen be the breadwinner for the mom and the sisters and all the other siblings. So that element still exists. So we can't run away from that. It's still going to be a part of it. Absolutely. But I think the hypocrisy of how some of these schools, the Pac-12, Big Ten, come together and Oklahoma will travel all the way hypothetically to Florida to play a game, and thousands of miles. No sweat, they got the money. But A&T didn't have to go as far, but had to make the move, not only because better competition, more money, but the traveling. So the hypocrisy of all the money of the Power Six that they could just, okay, it's 3,000 miles, no big deal.
A big deal.
But but the HBCUs is a big deal. I think talk about that. And then on a separate note with Deion, man, if he don't get an offensive line, his son,
gonna be
forget
limping.
being the number one pick in the number one quarterback, the number one pick in the draft. He need to be able to be healthy to get to the draft. Talk about that.
He's gonna be limping into the NFL draft, right? Yeah, I just got off the phone with Gary Harrell, former Howard coach, who's now the assistant head coach at Colorado, trying to hook up some tickets from folks here at A&T are going out to Denver for a conference. So Gary Harrell just returned a call and trying to hook up some tickets for them to see Colorado playing at home this weekend against Baylor. And we talked a lot. I said, how long is Deion going to be around? And he said, as long as they don't mess with his money, as long as they don't poke him too hard, he's going to be around for a minute. But no, the landscape has changed so much in college athletics in the last 3 or 4 years that most of the people that we know, the old heads, will be rolling in their graves in terms of trying to understand how things have flipped so much. And in one sense, it's probably long overdue. There needed to be some changes. The way that the NCAA was monopolizing everything and denying everybody else making money while they're making money hand over fist. It was time for that to change. It's like a lot of things in America that people have suffered from and make the necessary sacrifices or courageous moves to change things. So I think it's good that it's changed. But, and I'm trying to remember the first part of your question because I got focused on Deion. But
well, the hypocrisy of the money spent in traveling, where they just kind of brush it off, as opposed to HBCUs, they got to watch all the pennies, being in a similar situation, but not having all, the investment, the endowment money, all of those things that go into it.
Well, everything today is about putting yourself in the best position to make money. There's a reason that North Carolina A&T and Hampton left the MEAC, went to the CAA, and then to the Big South, and now, left the MEAC to go to the CAA. Go to the Big South. Now they're in the CAA. They're in the CAA because the potential, the 16 teams in the CAA that go from Maine all the way to North Carolina, maybe into South Carolina. A&T, when they left the MEAC, talked about, when they went to the Big South, they talked about 2 trips to Florida, to Bethune-Cookman and Florida A&M for every sport. And now they're making trips to New Hampshire, Boston, Massachusetts, Maine, New York City, New Jersey. So I don't pay a whole lot of attention to what people say as to in terms of athletics, in terms of why they're doing stuff. The bottom line is that with this new environment, the best situation you can get in is the responsibility not only of ADs, but the responsibility of the commissioners is to develop as many partnerships, sponsorships, to put yourself in the best neighborhood, so to speak. That whole thing about real estate, location. Got to put yourself in the best place. That's why people have predicted that the MEAC, who has only 6 teams playing football, was in jeopardy of maybe losing some more, because that's the responsibility that the ADs have, to put these institutions in the best position to make sure that athletics is not a negative, whether it be financially or in terms of the perception that is about the university. They talk about sports being the front porch of the university. They want to make sure that they're in the best position to do that, and they don't want to miss out on it. So I don't blame the ADs, whether at Hampton or at A&T. And believe me, and I said this years ago when Hampton left the MEAC. I was on a show on HBCU Game Day, guys you know very well, and I told them, I said, don't be surprised. A&T could leave the MEAC, and they were all shocked. I was like, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised if there are more changes. There are people constantly looking for the best opportunity. They're not satisfied with, like what you're talking about, the few dollars that they have at the HBCU level. They're looking for greater and better and bigger opportunities, particularly financially, so that they don't want to break even in sports. They want to be on the positive side of sports. They want to, they've even had some discussions this year about some teams wanting to move to the FBS level. I don't know if you've heard the recent rumor that there's talk about Morehouse wanting to get out of Division II and move into the FCS. So this is what the ADs are doing. And if the ADs are worth their salt, they have to be evaluating this the whole time. That's what Earl Hilton did at A&T. And I just happened to get privy to the fact that they were considering and looking at their options, So, we are tied and love the HBCU environment. We have been growing up in the HBCU environment. We like to see it continue. But again, the landscape has changed drastically, and you have to respond if you're going to survive and progress in this environment.
Yeah. Talking with Luke Williams, of course, here on the Batchelor News Show. Luke, let's go to your page from leading up to this week. Talk about some of the players that you had. Co-defensive player of the week, Grover Stewart of Albany State. 5 tackles, 4 solos. Co-defensive player of the week, Brian Cook at Howard. Big game with 5 tackles and 3 solos, 2 tackles for a loss. And offensive player of the week, Titus Howard, Alabama State. Blocked on all 62 plays, which is pretty darn hard to do in a game at any level at this point in terms of, we're talking NFL, of course. But, talk about those guys and what they represent for those teams.
Yeah, they're proven veterans. And, I always, when I evaluate the games, I always say how many plays did they get on? Because that tells you a lot. People like Titus Howard, Alabama State, a first-round pick of the Houston Texans. He's a mainstay at right tackle for the Texans. So he's not going to come out the game. They're not going to let him come out the game. Same for Teron Armstead out of Arkansas Pine Bluff, All-Pro, 2-time All-Pro veteran. He came out of the game because he's hurt, and he's going to his 12th year. He's like the senior guy from the HBCU ranks in the NFL. He's had some injury problems over the last 2 or 3 years, but the reason they brought him in was to protect Tua's left side. And I didn't check to see whether he was out of the game when he didn't actually get sacked. He actually ran the ball up the middle and should have slid instead of taking that hit.
Right.
But he's protecting not even his blind side because Tua's left-handed, but he's a mainstay for the Dolphins. So those guys that you mentioned, Grover Stewart, Brian Cook, these are starters in the league. And the reality is right now that a lot of the kids in the league out of the HBCU ranks are playing special teams and playing special teams only. For example, Marquise Bell, who was one of the leading tacklers for the Dallas Cowboys last year, a safety out of FAMU that they kind of slid into a hybrid position at linebacker last year. He put up like 78 tackles. He now can't get on the field as in regular downs. He's like a special team player. Kadero Hodge in his 8th year out of Prairie View A&M for the Atlanta Falcons is playing strictly special teams. And it just talks about the difficulty it is for HBCU players to really get into playing on every down on defense or offense. It's very difficult. And the few who are doing it are few and far between. Kobe Durant out of South Carolina State for the LA Rams is doing it. Joshua Williams, a guy out of Fayetteville State for the Chiefs, he's not even playing maybe half of the defensive snaps. So one of the things when I do the list of all of the back college players in the NFL this year, I said it was up from 31 to 35 over last year, but really 7 or 8 of those guys are on practice squads and only 22 of them are on active rosters. So it's still a struggle for HBCU players to crack, particularly starting lineups. Even a guy like Emmanuel Wilson for the Packers out of Fort Valley State, who started at Johnson C. Smith, he's become the number 2 running back for the for the Green Bay Packers. And many of them are saying, even though they got Josh Jacobs now, they're basically saying that many of them like Emmanuel Wilson a lot and think that he should get more opportunities. So no, those guys that you mentioned that are the offensive and defensive players of the week, they are pretty much established guys. But then we have a young guy last week, not this particular second week of the season, the first week, Brandon Codrington out of North Carolina Central, got traded on cut down day he got traded from the Jets to Buffalo, had a 53-yard kickoff return in his first NFL game. He's going to get his opportunity. So, the opportunities are out there. They're not as prolific as they were years ago for the HBCU players because, first of all, they're not getting that creme de la creme talent that used to come to the HBCUs 30 and 40 years ago. So
Right.
the guys who make it have proven themselves and have proven themselves even when they got to the NFL.
But one of the things I like about this, but what you do, you accentuate the positives, and I forget Kobe Durant, played at South Carolina State. I forget Isaiah Land played at FAM. I forgot totally James Houston with Detroit played at Jackson State. I certainly keep wishing, and I've said this to you before, that the Steelers will get Javon Hargrave back. But you know what he's doing? He wreaks havoc in San Fran. So that's one of the beauty things that you do, is that some of the guys get lost in the woods, right? Where are they now? And if people just tune into the Black College Sports page, they can find out. And I love the fact that you give it the NFL feel, but an NFL feel from an HBCU standpoint, and it shows some of these alum that maybe not the LC Greenwood types or someone's way back then, but certainly, like you said, a lot of our talent is sprinkled around the Power Six, I call, but there's still guys getting in the league and still making impact. Unfortunately, on special teams, but like you said, in the one case with the kid running it for 54 yards, he's definitely going to get more playing time.
Yeah, and he is he came out as a defensive back, but he really cut his teeth, so to speak, as a kick returner, even in North Carolina Central. So he's gone to the pros. I was talking to Doug Williams and Shaq yesterday on our HBCU Legacy Bowl. I helped them select the players for the Legacy Bowl, and we were talking about whether Brandon Codrington was down in New Orleans last year for the game, which he was. And we try to pick the best seniors, grads, or redshirt seniors who are coming out, invite them to the Black College All-Star game down in New Orleans. We get the pro scouts to come. All of the pro scouts, all the NFL teams come, and they get a chance to see them. And it's not resulting in a lot of them being drafted yet. But when cats like Kobe Durant come to the league and perform, when people like Joshua Williams come to the league and perform, it lets the scouts know that they can't ignore the HBCU players. They have to take a look at them. They have to grade them, so to speak. And they can find some that from the HBCU ranks that are going to make it in the NFL. But it's a labor of love for me. I grew up on HBCU sports when you didn't have to count on four hands how many players there were. There were 98 players in the league. When I started the Black College Sports page in 94, there were like 98 players in the league, and there were double-digit guys getting drafted every year. Now, it's since 2000, we haven't had double-digit guys getting and we had multiple first-round choices. That hasn't happened over the last 25 years, 30 years since I've been doing the Black College Sports page. So, things have changed, but I think it's still worth following these guys because, so much history is connected to these institutions that I think it's my responsibility to remind people as much as I can, as often as I can, how much the HBCUs have contributed to the history of the NFL. So actually a book I want to write called You Better Recognize the impact of HBCU players in the NFL, particularly in the Super Bowl.
Well, you would hope. You talk about history and tradition, the Caleb Williams and guys like that played at big time programs, USC, and even Sanders playing at Colorado. Dion there, I'm sure he made sure he knows the HBCU tradition and history, that if they didn't go, they know.
That's right.
That's right. And they didn't go because of whatever, they didn't go there, but they know and pay respect and homage to the HBCU colleges and institutions that paved the way for them to go to USC in the first place.
Absolutely.
And make all that money.
That's the very important point. I remember when James Houston, you mentioned the Detroit Lions edge rusher that was at Florida and transferred to Jackson State. He came to Jackson State game and he looked up in the stands. It was 50,000 people. He's like, man, what is this? Nobody told me about this. They don't get exposed to the HBCU environment. And he loved it. He loved it and flourished in that environment. That's why he's in the NFL. You never heard of James Houston before he went to Jackson State and turned it out, was number 2 in the nation in sacks, and has continued that and set some records in the NFL in his first year. So, yeah, so it's a wonderful experience, a wonderful environment that, I know, I told you I'm having a birthday. All my kids come. I took them to games every weekend when they were coming up. So they know that environment very, very well. And things help them as they've grown. They're in their 40s now, but they cherish all the time that we spent at the HBCUs.
Same here. Every time I had a chance to take the boys, we went, you're like me. You love baseball too as well back in the day. So I played baseball first. That was my first love. Mm-hmm. And so I tried to get them into it. Not really into that, but basketball and certainly football, HBCU games. And, when I took them to the CIAA basketball tournament, took them to the CIAA football championship, they was like, wow, Dad, yeah, it exists.
James Houston said, I've never seen 50,000 black fans in the stadium. That's not what he's used. It's not what he's used to in the SEC. So, Dion did a great service to the HBCUs for the 2.5 years that he spent there. So I wish him nothing but the best going forward.
Absolutely, and his sons, and that program. Lou, under the banner, new AD pending. If it's been a selection with Miss Suggs, and Alcorn State names a new AD. Talk about both of those.
Yeah, those who have been around HBCU sports in this area know the previous AD at FAMU very well, Tiffany Dawn Sykes. Everybody knows Tiff. It's a tough situation. Everybody actually, when she took the job at Florida A&M, they were like, you're walking into, they talk the Rattlers talk about strike. You're walking into a den of snakes down at Florida A&M. And she lasted about 1.5 years, which is about the average for probably their last 10 ADs, including Ken Riley, including the hitman Earl Holmes, who came in as a football coach. They've been going through coaches and ADs on a regular basis. So she spent 1.5 years there. Suggs is coming in. She's a FAMU person. And the big thing has been at FAMU, when any time Tiffany made a decision, it was second guessed. When she made a football coach decision, second guessed. She wanted to bring in Sean Gibbs from Fort Valley State. They were like, no, we want somebody that's already from FAM. They ended up getting James Colsey. She brought in the basketball coach, gave him a 3-year contract coming from the NAIA. He got an endorsement from Shaka Smart and some other people. They said, oh, no, we're not giving him a 4-year contract. We'll give him a 1-year prove-it contract. Other decisions she made, everything she did was second-guessed. And look, if you've been around HBCU sports like you and I both have, we know that some of these fans and some of these fan bases are as fickle in the HBCU realm as they are in other realms. And but she fought a good fight, did what she could do. She put her best foot forward down at FAMU. I don't think it was appreciated. and she's out of there, and they're bringing somebody in I think she's a FAMU alum, and she's worked in the department over the last in several capacities. So they're probably very glad to get somebody who has Rattler background. But I would tell her that's never been a criterion. They'll get rid of her too if they don't like something that she's doing. So anyway, they're voting on her. I think the Board of Trustees is voting on her Friday to try to give her and finalize her and approve her $250,000 a year contract. Alcorn State is also another program that's kind of in flux. They lost Fred McNair, Steve McNair's older brother, that left as the coach. They got a new AD. They got rid of the athletic director Horn. There've been quite a bit of rumblings about Alcorn State, how they dealt with COVID, how many of the ADs were watching to see how the conference dealt with them. So they've moved on from Horn, and what is his name? The new AD's name is
it's
Anderson? No.
Yeah, no, Robinson.
Dwayne Robinson. Yeah, Dwayne Robinson, yeah. But he's got a history of he's been at FAMU, he's been at Alabama A&M, but he also has a connection to Alcorn State. So they're bringing him in that new capacity also. So two of the programs, and again, this environment that we talked about, which is what can you do for me now? What kind of moves can you make to enhance whatever it is we're doing, whether it's TV contracts, whether it's sponsorships, and look, believe me, the SWAC now has 12 schools, FAMU and Bethune-Cookman included. Don't fool yourself and think that they are satisfied with being in the SWAC. They're going to be looking for opportunities, and the opportunities present themselves to make more money, and put themselves in a better financial position. Don't be surprised if some of them will start to leave.
Yeah, I agree. She's a 92 grad of FAM, by the way. And, it's something to be said, Lou, I think is underrated, is stability. You can't, we talk about, getting rid of coaches too soon. Your administrative team has to be a stable situation. You got to give people a chance, and you got to let people do what they do.
That was the big problem in Florida A&M. I'm sure you followed the story. Somebody came up and gave them a 30-plus-year-old African-American man from Texas who is in the hemp business, is making furniture out of hemp, gave them a $230 million gift that they actually let him speak at the graduation back in May. And he said he's going to give them $230 million. And everybody said, well, who is a brother got $230 million to give FAM that nobody knows about? And the fallout from that was that's what's happening. That's why TIF has gone from Florida A&M, because they fired and tried to get rid of the entire administrative staff behind that faux pas and that situation that they did with this guy, and it proved out to be that it was fraudulent. He didn't have any $230 million to give them. And they were basically saying it was a PR nightmare to say that you're so inept that you can't vet to find out whether, and you're going to bring him on the stage to speak at the graduation, talking about he's giving $230 million. And it's like, who's this guy we never heard of? Not that I'm sure there's some African Americans out there that might have $230 million, but it's not a whole lot that's going to be able to give that to the university. So she was, that was the circumstance that led to Miss Sykes losing her position at FAMU. And he's not the first one who's had some bogus, fraudulent kind of deal that they're making with the schools. And I guess you could say the worst thing I think is that DeSantis, they're saying this guy is a DeSantis appointee that DeSantis had something to do with, and he wants to close FAMU's law school and close FAMU's business school. So anyway, there's always more to the story than meets the eye.
Yeah, he ain't Willie Gary. I mean, what is this? What is that about? You don't vet a guy that's anyway. I digress. You said, we know that the soap opera that goes on, and we'll just leave it at that. All right, Luke, we got a 2-minute warning. I want to get into the top performances, starting with the passing with Noah
Biden.
Biden with 352 yards and a touchdown. Talk about him.
In a loss, actually. Southern
Right.
lost to Jackson this past week. He threw for a lot of yards, but didn't result in a win. And what I do, I just try to each week try to compile and look at the stats and see who performed well, who did well, and it gives everybody an opportunity to keep up with these guys, whether you see them or not. We up here on the Atlantic coast, so we don't necessarily get to see all these SWAC games, even though there's so many games available these days on streaming, man. Every week you have an opportunity to see as many teams as you like. I know on my Saturdays, I have the TV behind me, I have my phone, I have my laptop, and maybe have another TV on upstairs. I can try to keep up with stuff and not miss anything. But Biden is a good player for Southern. Southern has a new coach as well, Terrence Graves, who previously coached at Grambling and a couple of other places. This is his first year at Southern. And that's another environment. They don't take well to losing down at Southern,
Right.
So and especially not losing the Bayou Classic. So Southern has not gotten off to a great start, losing, I think it was 33-15 to Jackson State this week. You can believe that those Jaguars are going to be watching Terrence Graves very carefully. You only get to lose to Grambling a couple of times. You can't use them 2 or 3 years in a row, and it's like you got to go.
Yeah.
They don't work around here. They don't work in Jaguar land on the bluff in Baton Rouge. That doesn't work. So
and the guy behind him, and Darius Ocean, was the winning quarterback in that game. 331 yards.
And the Darius Ocean kid, now this is the big story this week on my page, is the fact that Johnson C. Smith, other than Texas College and NAIA team down in Texas, they're the only undefeated teams in black college football right now. And nobody was expecting they've been struggling. Johnson C. Smith has had 7 winning seasons since 1975. That's almost 50 years. And their coach, Maurice Flowers, who you'll see at the top of the page this week, Maurice Flowers came in and said, I'm turning this around. I'm taking Johnson C. Smith back to the days of Eddie McGirt, a legendary coach at Johnson C. Smith, who was there for 20 years and had Johnson C. Smith as one of the premier programs in the CIAA back in those days. And they're off to a great start. And they got a big game this week against defending CIAA champion Virginia Union. That's like my marquee game of the week, to watch Darius Ocean, to watch Brevin Caldwell, the leading receiver in the CIAA right now. Darius Ocean is the leading passer in the CIAA right now. And they got a kid. So a big story on the black college level this year. I know he said 2 minutes, but this kid's name is Corveras Crouch, 6'2", 225, was much sought after coming out of high school, went to Tennessee out of high school, then to Michigan State. We talked about the portal and talked about transfers. He's now back home in Charlotte at Johnson C. Smith, and a big bruising running back. So he's going up against Jada Byers, 2-time CIAA Player of the Week this week when the Golden Bulls take on the Panthers. So that's my marquee game for this week. One I hope I could see, but I'm going to be celebrating my birthday this weekend. I probably won't be able to go to any games this weekend.
Nah, you don't need to. You deserve to not go. Take that hat off and enjoy that big 7-0. Is right. What you should do. Rushing, when you look at what Ike Brown did and you look at what Charles Simmons did, in that bunch, is it one guy that stands out that you think is going to be really good running the ball this year?
Well, the guy I just mentioned is really he didn't. Virginia Union was off this past week, but Jada Byers is the beast. He's only I talked about Crouch being 6'2", 215. Mm-hmm. Jada Byers is like 5'8", 180, $180 and change, but shifty, quick, fast kid out of New Jersey that's really tore up the CIAA over the past couple of years. He's not quite as quick as Tariq Cohen from A&T. He's not that kind of quickness, but very shifty, very elusive, doesn't go down on the first hit. He's a very, very tough guy. Ike Brown is a kid I recommended to the HBCU Legacy Bowl this past week, 5'9", 215. He's around the same size as Emmanuel Wilson, the kid out of Fort Valley that's now with the Packers. He has similar kind of skills, runs hard, has the ideal kind of size and strength. Ike Brown is the guy to keep your eye on. And Lane, Lane has produced a couple of NFL players, Fred Lane, particularly Jacoby Jones. So it wouldn't be surprised to see Ike Brown get an opportunity to play on the next level as well.
And some big plays in receiving with Brevin Caldwell and Evelyn and Gibson had 149 yards and a touchdown. Any in that group that you see that will stand out?
Well, just the one that you said at the top, Brevin Caldwell, he's been performing ever since. I think he's a junior now at Johnson C. Smith. He's been performing every year he's been there. I think he was all CIAA as a freshman. He's one of the linchpins of what Maurice Flowers is trying to do at Johnson C. Smith. There's some other guys. Jamal Jones actually transferred from Lane. I think Evelyn is from Lane, isn't he?
Right.
Evelyn, yeah. He's been a great performer. He's been a kick returner as well as an outstanding wide receiver. So I don't know if you noticed this week that the Steelers picked up a former Black college player, Shaq Davis, out of South Carolina State.
Mm-hmm.
They picked him up 1 week and then they let him go a week later. So I just let him go a couple of days ago. But I was looking forward to him getting an opportunity because you know how weak we are at wide receiver behind Mr. Pickens. So he didn't get a chance before they had to make some moves and let him go. But I wouldn't be surprised to get him picked up. He's a very, very talented guy, 6'4", the one who just killed Dion down at the Celebration Bowl for South Carolina State with 3 touchdowns in that game.
The one thing real quick that is always impressive to me is on the defensive side when you got guys who are just tackling machines. Horatio Johnson had 14, and then sacks. When you look at what Dylan Dubois did with 5, it's tough to get 1. He got 5.
Yeah.
For Texas College. So talk about them, and then of course the interceptions with Devin Buskin.
Yeah, Devin Buskin was the only guy who had 2 interceptions this week. But yeah, the kid that had 5 sacks is playing for Texas College. Texas College is the other undefeated team, I believe so. That was the other undefeated team other than Johnson C. Smith.
Right.
And he had 5 sacks, but DeAndre, and I think DeAndre must have missed my list, but DeAndre had 3 sacks for Tennessee State when they played Arkansas Pine Bluff down in Memphis this week. So, these edge rushers, you talked about Isaiah Land before, you talked about James Houston. This is one of the positions that's kind of open in the NFL. They're always looking for people who can rush the passer, So, keep your eye on Chinnis Berry, brought in one of his guys out of Benedict. He really took all conference players from Benedict, brought them down to South Carolina State. So he's got like 6 of them starting for South Carolina State now. And one of them is an edge rusher who they're projecting to be possible NFL pick. So no, that's I look for the people who have the most sacks, the people who have the most interceptions, as well as all of those other categories on a week-to-week basis. And that helps, and that really helps when I'm dealing with Doug and Shaq in terms of picking the HBC Legacy Bowl guys.
Yeah, and those guys are exceptional athletes to make those plays.
Absolutely.
Particularly on defense. And by the way, Noah Miles, Keandre Booker tied with the 3 sacks in the game. All right, last 2. I love your Black College 5. How do you come up with your 5 both in FBS and then in the Division II NAIA?
Yeah, well, I don't do a poll because I found that trying to do a poll and expecting guys to watch all the games and be able to assess how each team is. So I basically this is the Black College Sports page selection. I don't do a poll. So I just watch the games, watch how they go, see who beats whom, on a week-to-week kind of basis, and just pick the top 5. Roscoe Nance, the late great Roscoe Nance was a colleague of mine, and Roscoe used to say, "Luke, it makes no sense to pick 10 FCS teams and 10 Division II teams because it's only 40 teams playing football, so you're going to be picking half of the 40. If you're trying to do a Division II top 10 and the FCS top 10, so I cut it down to 5 because that gives you a better idea of the quality, the creme de la creme, if you will, who's out there. So that's what we try to do on a week-to-week basis, to let everybody know what we think, what the Black College Sports Page. I got a few years in this. This is my 31st year of doing this. So I got a few years of watching these guys, watching these coaches, watching these players. So I just try to give them an idea of what we think here at the Black College Sports Page of who are the best teams, whether they're on the FCS or level or the Division II level.
Looking at your D1 list, put aside Florida A&M at Troy. We'll put aside the Morgan State game and even the Alabama State Sanford game. I want to focus in on Central against A&T. Talk about that one. And the Battle of the Real HU, Howard taking on Hampton.
Yeah, those are two games. Both of them now, all of those schools were in the CIAA at one time. They're now non-conference foes, but the rivalry is very intense for obvious reasons. Central and A&T only separated by 45 miles. Only thing probably more intense than that is A&T's rivalry with Winston-Salem State, or for that matter, Central's rivalry with Winston-Salem State, right here in this little triad area of North Carolina, triad and triangle. You have these very intense rivalries, and I was looking at their history. They've gone back and forth, particularly A&T and Central. They did the Aggie Eagle Classic. They played down in Raleigh for years. They've been to Charlotte. They're now back home. I think Trey Oliver says the first time they actually played them in Durham in about 5 years.
Right.
So it's going to be intense. It's always going to be intense when the two meet. I can actually go back. Oh boy, it had to be 40 years when A&T and Central had a brawl at a basketball game that made national headlines, ESPN. It's probably when the rivalry was at its peak and from a negative standpoint. Trey Oliver said in the press conference this week that it may not be as bitter as it was back then. So it's kind of settled down. I wouldn't call it a friendly rivalry, but it's still a very good rivalry. And same thing with Howard and Hampton. These are teams just like A&T and Central that were in the CIAA. That's where their history is. They competed against each other then. And, back in the day, they couldn't be called the real HU because Hampton was Hampton Institute, whereas Howard was Howard University. But now that Hampton has become and known as Hampton University, it's only in the last few years that they've come up the real HU. Which one is the real HU? Actually, I attended Howard, so but I'm not partial to that. I think that that's a great rivalry. They're very, very compatible in terms of their academics and their objectives and what they have done historically. So it's a good rivalry, and it's a good thing to call it the real HBCU. They don't even play it at Howard's campus. They actually play it at the Audi Field up in the DC area. You know about that place. And it's a nice venue. They can almost fill it up. And just like they did last week, they had 31,000 up in the Meadowlands, what used to be called the Meadowlands. There's another name now. They call it
MetLife.
Yeah, MetLife Stadium. But they had 31,000 to see Hampton and Morehouse. Again, two HBCUs with similar academic backgrounds and similar academic profiles, so to speak. And they had 31,000, very good crowd up there at the MetLife Stadium. So I think those two games, again, those are two of them that I focused on this week as intense rivalries before either of these teams get into their conference schedules. Good kind of measuring stick to see where they are before they enter their conference competition.
Yeah, Howard taking care of Morehouse 35-21. Lutz BCSP. Central number 1, A&M 2, Howard 3, Morgan State 4, Alabama State 5. The D2 side, Lou, is the final part. Is much more intriguing this week because every team in your top 5 has a chance to make a statement. Johnson C. Smith, you mentioned they'll be hosting the defending champion Panthers of Virginia Union. That should be something. Clark Atlanta just finished with Florida Memorial. They'll be taking on Bethune, the SWAC Bethune-Cookman team.
Absolutely.
Virginia State hosting Winston-Salem State. And we mentioned Union, Johnson C. Smith. And Shaw hosting Lincoln of Pennsylvania in Durham. These are statement games or barometer games, it seems like, Lou, where teams early in the year, especially if they play, in the case of the D2 level, they play in conference games, where they're going to be. So talk about those games and how big they are early in the year.
Absolutely. Well, the big thing in the CIAA, the big news in the CIAA is there's no more North and South division.
Right.
The North champion versus the South champion is no more. The two teams with the best record are going to be playing in the championship game. For Johnson C. Smith to start 3-0 and have big wins over now Tuskegee, which was big to start the season. Then they beat Morehouse the next week, and then they come back and just shellacked Lincoln this past week. They're riding high, and this game has a lot of intensity. I even said intrigue, early season intrigue to see, is Johnson C. Smith for real? Virginia Union and Dr. Alvin Parker would like nothing better than to basically bury them, and they're playing down in Charlotte. But I'm sure Dr. Alvin Parker is coming in to say, you're not ready for the big time yet. You're not at our level yet. So I think
we had him on earlier too to talk about that game too, and of course, a humble pie, but off the record, I'm sure he's saying you're not ready.
Yeah, that's right. He can mask it. He's not going to say much. He's not trying to give them bulletin board material. But I think Johnson C. Smith is ready. I think this is going to be a close game. Like I said, if it wasn't my birthday, I may have tried to gone down to Charlotte to watch that game. That's what I would say is my game of the week. But right. What you said, I think the other games are equally important. Winston-Salem State is trying to work its way back. Before Fayetteville State ruled the CIAA South, Winston-Salem State was the beast of the CIAA South. And they have fallen out of favor in the last few years. Robert Massey, I think, has them playing better. A&T had to go to overtime to beat them a couple of weeks ago. I think they've shown improvement. They have a competent, I think, very capable quarterback in Dalen Lee. So I think that Virginia State is the coach's pick to win the CIAA this year, not Virginia Union. Right. Virginia State's got some transfers that they brought in. Henry Frazier has done a great job up there bringing in some of those transfers. So the fact that Winston-Salem State is going up to Virginia State, it could be very much could be a statement game. And you mentioned also, we talked about Smith and Union, but Clark Atlanta is the other surprise team. If I would say the biggest story so far in the 2024 season, Johnson C. Smith would be number one. Clark Atlanta would be number two. They got both the coach and the quarterback from Allen University, new member of the SIAC. They got David Keaton as the head coach, and they got what's my kid's name, the quarterback, David Wright as the quarterback. He was very prolific for Allen. Both of them transferred. It's like the coach and the quarterback came together. They're down at Clark Atlanta, and Clark Atlanta has really probably hadn't seen the light of day in terms of winning record in the last 20 years. They started 2-0. They had a game this week, tied at 28 down at Florida Memorial before weather halted the game. So this is, again, it's a statement game for them because Clark Atlanta is not playing in the SIAC. They're moving up to what most people would consider probably one of the weaker programs in the SWAC, Bethune-Cookman. But they will play. That would be a measuring stick for them to see if David Keaton and David Wright really have Clark Atlanta ready to contend in the SIAC. So I think all of those games are going to be big. Shaw, who's off to, again, a good start, in my opinion. They're playing Lincoln, Pennsylvania, who might be the most disappointing team. Their quarterback, Isaiah Freeman, was the preseason player of the year in the CIAA, and they've struggled out the gate so far at 0-3, 0-2, I'm sorry, 0-1 in the conference. And that's kind of been a surprise. I think some people thought Lincoln was ready to compete, but they've shown in those two games that they've lost that they still have a long way to go.
Yeah, and they scored a lot of points. in the past, and
did.
like you said, they're struggling now. And Shaw, let's take it slow because they got off to a pretty good start last year and tailed at the end. I hope they do well, but it'd be interesting to see what happens with them. Great stuff as always, Lute. Before we go, let people know about the Black Collar Sports page, where they can find it, and all those, how they can follow you as well.
Yeah, my 31st year doing the Black Collar Sports page, and my beloved friend Eric Moore and anadan.com went away a couple of years ago, and now my page, and I saw that you had an advertisement for it. I was glad that you did. The HBCU HBCU Professional Sports Media Association, Pro
Right.
Sports Media Association it's called. That's where my page resides right now online. If you go to HBCU Pro Sports Media PSMA.com, the Black Collar Sports page goes up there every week, and you can see what I produce each week to try to keep up with what's going on in the HBCU world.
Well, you do a phenomenal job, and again, happy birthday to you. Enjoy it, just consume it. All your family around, let them pamper you. You deserve it. All the hard work and all the raising and things that you've done, Lute. And I appreciate you. Love you, man.
Thank
Be
you, bro.
safe. Enjoy your birthday. We'll talk with you next week, sir.
Thanks for having me, LA. Look forward to doing it again.
Absolutely. Thank you. Always good to have Lute Williams in. He is the owner and publisher of the Black Collar Sports page. Phenomenal work. You heard it. I mean, I could throw any topic on HBCU. We're just talking football. That's the part of the season now, but he knows the ins and outs. And the biggest thing, when you go to his page, check out how he highlights those players who played at these historically Black colleges and institutions and now are doing well in a lot of cases, and certainly in cases where they may not be starters, but they're making contributions. And that's what it's all about. And of course, you can see it at the HBCU Pro Sports Media website, along with MLB. We have a Black baseball writers and so many talented brothers and sisters that are working with the organization. So we certainly appreciate Lute Williams' 70th birthday. Looks younger than I am, but we certainly like to give people their flowers before they go on. A happy birthday to Lute Williams. That's it for us. Follow us on Facebook at LA Batchelor and Pad Nation on Facebook, Pad Nation 2 at I want to say Twitter, X, LA Batchelor at YouTube, LA Batchelor at Instagram, LA Batchelor at LinkedIn. And if you're interested in advertising with us, do shoot us an email at labachelor40@gmail.com, LABATCHELOR40 @gmail.com.